If that woman knew who I really am, she probably wouldn't have thanked me. The thought crossed Miguel's mind at the exact moment his hand grabbed her arm, stopping her from falling onto the wet sidewalk. The rain had been light but persistent, turning the pavement slick and unforgiving. Papers flew out of her leather folder and scattered across the ground, and for a brief second, everything slowed down. "Careful. You almost slipped," he said, his voice calm, steady, nothing forced. She took a sharp breath, straightened her posture, and adjusted her elegant coat. Her eyes moved quickly, the way people look when their mind is already somewhere else. "Thank you," she replied. "That was careless of me." Miguel crouched down without hesitation. One by one, he gathered the papers, aligning the corners carefully, as if they were something valuable. He didn't read them, didn't comment, didn't ask who she was. He simply handed the folder back, neat and organized. She watched him in silence. She couldn't explain why, but something about the way he moved felt different. In a city where everyone rushed past each other, this man took his time. No complaints, no expectations. "Have a good day," he said softly, already stepping back. She nodded and walked away, convinced the moment meant nothing. Just another anonymous interaction in a busy morning. She didn't know that life rarely crosses paths without intention. Helena had always believed that justice had to be cold in order to be fair. From the first days of her career, she learned that emotions cloud judgment, that empathy can blur facts, and that truth must be extracted from evidence, not from feelings. Tears didn't belong in courtrooms. Intuition didn't replace proof. That belief had shaped her reputation. Inside the courthouse, Helena was known as precise, disciplined, unshakable. Lawyers respected her. Prosecutors trusted her. Defendants feared her. She followed the law to the letter, and that discipline had taken her far. That morning, however, something felt off. As she entered her chambers, she reviewed the schedule for the day. Several hearings, routine matters, and one case drawing unusual attention. An armed robbery at a downtown jewelry store. High value, media coverage, public pressure. According to the file, the suspect had been arrested a few hours after the crime. Cash in his pocket. Witnesses who claimed to recognize him. Security footage. On paper, it looked clean. Almost too clean. She took a sip of coffee and tried to ignore the lingering image of the man on the sidewalk. The calm in his eyes. The way he handled her documents like they mattered. Focus, she told herself. The courtroom filled quickly when the hearing began. Journalists sat in the back, pens ready. The prosecutor organized his notes with confidence. Everything suggested a straightforward outcome. "Bring in the defendant," the bailiff announced. Helena lifted her eyes, and her breath caught in her throat. It was him, the same man from the street, the same face, the same quiet presence. Now wearing worn detention clothes, his hands cuffed, his shoulders slightly tense, but his expression unchanged. Calm, resigned. For a split second, their eyes met. Miguel recognized her instantly. He looked surprised, just for a moment, then lowered his gaze as if accepting the cruel irony of fate. He said nothing. The room fell silent. Helena felt something she hadn't felt in years: uncertainty. She straightened in her chair, forcing her voice to remain steady. "State your full name." "Miguel Andrade." "Do you understand the charges against you?" "Yes, Your Honor, but I'm innocent." The prosecutor stood confidently, laying out the narrative with precision. The robbery, the fear, the weapon, the escape, the arrest. He spoke of public safety, of accountability, of the need for justice to be swift. Security footage played on the screen. A man wearing a dark jacket and a cap. The image was grainy, the face barely visible. Similar height, similar build. "That's him," one store employee testified. "I'm almost sure." Almost. The word echoed in Helena's mind. The defense attorney spoke next, visibly nervous. He explained that Miguel worked as an informal mechanic, fixing cars and motorcycles wherever he could, that the money found on him was payment for a job earlier that morning, that Miguel had no criminal record, that he cooperated fully with the police. His voice trembled. He lacked confidence. He lacked presence. Helena leaned forward. "Did you carry a weapon that day?" she asked. "No, ma'am," Miguel replied. "I've never owned a gun. I work with my hands, not violence." She nodded, making notes she already knew wouldn't capture the weight of what she felt. The hearing was suspended. As Miguel was escorted out, he turned slightly and spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I only tried to help you this morning." That sentence didn't belong in the case file, but it went straight into Helena's conscience. That night, she couldn't sleep. She replayed the scene on the sidewalk over and over, the care, the silence, the absence of desperation. She thought about how many guilty people had stood before her filled with arrogance, anger, or excuses. Miguel had none of that. The next morning, Helena requested additional investigations, a deeper review of the footage, a precise comparison of the stolen amount, nearby cameras that hadn't been analyzed. The prosecutor objected. "Your Honor, this is unnecessary. The evidence is clear." But Helena had learned something the law never taught her. Justice isn't speed, it's courage. And somewhere between the street and the courtroom, a truth was waiting to be seen. Helena didn't announce her doubts out loud. She knew better. In the judicial world, uncertainty is often mistaken for weakness, and weakness gets punished quietly. Instead, she buried herself in the case files, digging deeper than she ever had before. The media didn't like that. Headlines started to appear. "Judge delays decision in clear robbery case. Justice system slows down while criminal walks free, for now." Every article felt like a finger pointing at her integrity. Colleagues began stopping her in the hallways, lowering their voices, offering advice that sounded more like warnings. "You're overthinking this, Helena. This case is politically sensitive. Sometimes you have to trust the process." She listened. She nodded. But inside, something refused to quiet down. Late at night, alone in her office, Helena replayed the footage again, frame by frame. She zoomed in, adjusted contrast, slowed the video. The man in the recording moved fast, nervous, almost frantic. His posture was tense, his shoulders hunched. That wasn't Miguel. Miguel moved differently, calm, grounded, like someone who had learned patience the hard way. The forensic report arrived the next day. The amount of cash found on Miguel didn't match the stolen total. The difference was small, but undeniable. Enough to raise a question no one wanted to ask. Where was the rest of the money? She requested footage from nearby streets, cameras that had been ignored because they complicated the story. One of them showed a second man running moments before Miguel had even appeared in the area. He entered a dark sedan. The license plate was partially visible. Helena felt her chest tighten. This wasn't doubt anymore. This was truth knocking quietly. Meanwhile, Miguel sat in a holding cell staring at the wall. He wasn't angry. Anger had left him years ago. What remained was something heavier, acceptance mixed with fear. He had seen men like him disappear into the system before, innocent or not. Once the machine started moving, it rarely stopped. A public defender visited him. "They're saying the judge is stalling," the lawyer said. "That could be good or bad." Miguel smiled faintly. "She looked at me like she was listening," he replied. "That's already more than most." Back at the courthouse, pressure escalated. The prosecutor demanded a resolution. The Chief Justice called Helena into a private meeting. "You're putting the court in an uncomfortable position," he said carefully. "Public confidence matters." "So does truth," Helena replied. He studied her for a long moment. "Be careful," he warned. "Not every fight is worth your career." That night, Helena sat alone in her apartment, lights off, city glowing outside the window. She thought about her early years as a law student, when justice felt like a calling, not a calculation. She thought about how easy it was to hide behind procedures and forget the people those procedures affected. She remembered Miguel's hands, rough, honest, careful. By the next hearing, the room was packed. Reporters leaned forward. The prosecutor spoke first, visibly irritated. "This delay is unnecessary," he said. "The evidence supports conviction." Helena didn't respond immediately. She reviewed her notes slowly, deliberately. "Evidence doesn't support conclusions," she finally said. "It supports questions." A murmur spread through the courtroom. She ordered the new footage played. The second man appeared on the screen, running, nervous, entering the car, timestamp clearly visible. The room shifted. The prosecutor's confidence wavered. Miguel looked up, confusion giving way to cautious hope. Helena felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. She knew what came next would define her, not just as a judge, but as a human being. And for the first time in years, she understood something deeply uncomfortable. Following the law was easy. Standing for justice was not. The decision was approaching, and there would be consequences, no matter which path she chose. The atmosphere inside the courthouse shifted after that hearing. What had once felt like a routine case now carried an uncomfortable weight. Conversation stopped when Helena walked past. Doors closed more quickly. Smiles became cautious. The system had noticed her. That afternoon, Helena received a formal memo requesting an internal review of her conduct. The wording was polite, almost friendly, but the message was clear: stay in line. Questioning the process had consequences. She read the document twice, then set it aside. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the realization that there was no turning back. Meanwhile, the investigation into the second suspect quietly gained traction. The partial license plate led to a registered vehicle with prior robbery connections. A man with a record, a pattern, a history that fit far better than Miguel ever had. The prosecutor knew it too. In a closed-door meeting, he confronted Helena. "You're undermining my case," he said, voice tight. "I'm doing my job," she replied. "You're turning this into a spectacle." "No," Helena said calmly. "The spectacle was pretending this was simple." The tension between them was thick enough to feel. Miguel, still detained, sensed the shift before anyone explained it. Guards treated him differently. Not kinder, just less certain. Hope crept in carefully, like something fragile. His public defender returned with cautious optimism. "They found another suspect," she said. "Nothing official yet." Miguel closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "I knew the truth would surface," he whispered. "It always does. Just not always in time." The final hearing approached with an intensity that pulled in everyone involved. The courtroom overflowed. Media trucks lined the street outside. The case had transformed from a robbery trial into a referendum on the justice system itself. Helena stood before the bench, fully aware that whatever she did next would follow her for the rest of her career. The prosecutor opened, less confident now, his voice measured. "We acknowledge new developments," he said. "However, we maintain that the defendant's proximity and possession of cash remain concerning." Helena listened patiently. Then she spoke. "Concern is not proof." She ordered the complete set of evidence presented: new footage, forensic discrepancies, witness inconsistencies. One by one, the narrative collapsed under its own weight. The defense barely had to speak. The final witness, a detective, hesitated before answering. "No," he admitted. "There is no direct evidence placing Miguel Andrade inside the store." Silence filled the room. Helena took a deep breath. "In this court," she said, her voice steady but firm, We do not convict people because it's convenient. We do not sacrifice individuals to preserve appearances. She looked directly at Miguel. The evidence fails to meet the burden of proof. This court finds the defendant not guilty. The room erupted. Miguel froze, stunned. It took a moment for the words to reach him. When they did, his shoulders sagged, not in triumph, but in relief so deep it felt almost painful. Helena didn't smile. She knew what awaited her next. Outside, the media exploded with questions. Some praised her courage. Others accused her of bias. A complaint was filed. An ethics committee announced a review. That evening, Helena returned home exhausted. She sat in silence, unsure whether she had just saved a man or destroyed her own career. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Thank you for seeing me as human." She stared at the screen for a long time, because deep down she knew the truth. Justice had been served, but the cost was still coming. The weeks that followed were quieter on the surface, but heavier underneath. The courtroom returned to its routine. The cameras moved on to the next scandal, and the city pretended nothing extraordinary had happened. But for Helena, everything had changed. The ethics review moved forward, slow and deliberate. No public accusations, no dramatic hearings, just closed doors, formal letters, and meetings filled with polite language and unspoken judgment. She wasn't suspended. She wasn't punished outright. But she felt the shift. Invitations stopped coming. Certain colleagues avoided eye contact. Others looked at her with a mixture of respect and discomfort. Standing up for the truth had not destroyed her career, but it had marked it. Helena accepted that. One evening, as she left the courthouse later than usual, she noticed a familiar figure standing across the street. Miguel. No longer wearing detention clothes, just simple jeans, a worn jacket, hands in his pockets. He waited until she crossed. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me," he said gently. She stopped in front of him. "I'm glad you came." They stood there for a moment, the city noise filling the silence between them. No courtrooms, no microphones, just two people whose lives had collided in an unexpected way. "I got my job back," Miguel said. "Same garage, same pay, but it feels different now." "How so?" Helena asked. "I don't walk with my head down anymore," he replied. Being seen, that changes a person. Helena nodded. She understood that better than anyone. "I lost some things," she admitted, "but I gained clarity." Miguel smiled softly. Most people never get that. They parted without promises, without dramatic goodbyes. They didn't need them. Months passed. Helena continued judging cases. She still followed the law, still respected the process, but something had shifted deep inside her. She listened more, asked better questions, paused when others rushed. She no longer confused efficiency with justice. Miguel moved forward, too. He volunteered at a local repair shop, training young mechanics. Kids who reminded him of himself, quiet, overlooked, underestimated. He taught them more than machines. He taught them patience, dignity, responsibility. Occasionally, their paths crossed again. A nod, a brief smile, an unspoken understanding. One rainy morning, much like the one where it all began, Helena walked through the city and slowed her pace. She noticed people more, the ones who hurried, the ones who struggled, the ones who helped without being asked. She finally understood something the law never spelled out. Justice doesn't begin in courtrooms. It begins in choices. In moments no one is watching. In the decision to see someone as human before labeling them as anything else. And sometimes, the most powerful judgments are made long before a gavel ever strikes.